here with my partner, John Valdez, and talking about the case we recently settled. I'm talking settlement, the whole cost was $15 million. When you take into account the subrogation claim that we were able to knock down in the case, when you include everything, and the ultimate benefit to the clients, I should say, was $15 million. Of course, we took our attorney's fees out of that. But tell us a little bit about that case. How did that case come into us?
So this was a workplace injury case. It happened in the state of Texas, but I think the key component is we were successfully able to get it filed in New Mexico.
And why does more file in New Mexico? What's the difference?
New Mexico law overall is better. The venue, what we call, is better for plaintiffs in New Mexico. System overall is better for plaintiffs. So we wanted to get it in New Mexico. Particularly, one of the best jurisdictions, in my opinion, the whole country is northern New Mexico. Santa Fe area, Rio Arriba. That's a very good plaintiff-friendly place where we want it. And we were able to get it filed there.
Okay, so we originally filed it in El Paso County. We ultimately non-suit dismissed that case and refiled it over there. And of course, there were lots of jurisdictional files because they were claiming that it should have been in Texas. It should not have been in New Mexico. And while we were able to keep some of the defendants there, the last defendant who was fighting the claim and saying it should be moved to Texas, we were going through fights with them when we settled the case. So even just moving it over there was enough to able to get that case settled, correct?
That's correct.
Because we believe we had some really good arguments, jurisdiction in New Mexico. Let's just talk a little bit about why is New Mexico so much better than Texas? What are the things that make it so much better?
I think one of the biggest overall, the climate when it comes to a jury pool is much better for plaintiffs.
My experience overall, John, is that the New Mexico judges are extremely professional. It's almost like being in federal court, right? There's no behind the scenes stuff. There's nobody talking to the judge behind. They're super professional.
Absolutely. That has been one thing that distinguishes New Mexico from Texas. From our experience is that New Mexico judges are always prepared like federal judges, and you're absolutely always ready to make a fair ruling, very professional.
But it's the rulings at the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court that trickle down and make a big difference.
That's a huge difference. When you compare the New Mexico Supreme Court versus, for example, the Texas Supreme Court.
And part of that is the problem is how we elect judges, right? And they're appointed basically in New Mexico, and then they have retention elections. So you get more professional judges, right?
That's correct. That's a huge difference.
And whereas in Texas, the Supreme Court basically, those judges are elected, they get lots of money for industry, insurance companies, and other people. And as a result, they've moved hard against plaintiffs, correct?
That's absolutely what's happened in Texas.
And so maybe the argument better is even better, a fair playing field in New Mexico, whereas it's so slanted against you in Texas, right?
Yeah, I think that's how it's fair.
So we were able to move it over there, get it into Santa Fe. How did we get Santa Fe? The accident happened in El Paso County, Texas. How come it did go in Doña Ana County, which is the county right across from El Paso in New Mexico? How did we get it up in to Santa Fe? Because that's jurisdiction, or that area, Rio Arriba County ultimately, which part of it covers Santa Fe. How are we able to do that?
Correct. New Mexico has very unique venue rule statutes when it comes to where you can file a lawsuit. And one of those is you look to where a defendant has a registry. And one of the defendants we were able to discover had a registered agent in Rio Arriba County. Therefore, we were able to file it there. And that's one of the ways that we use. Another unique venue provision in Mexico law is if there's a death in a case, for example, a wrongful death case, you look to where the personal representative of the estate resides, and you can file the lawsuit in that county.
So now, when we originally took this case, it was my understanding that most people didn't really even think that maybe we had a chance to win this case because there was some difficulty proof. How did that change from Texas to New Mexico?
Also, there are very stark differences after New Mexico and Texas law. The cause of action, I think we were able to sue, for example, in New Mexico, things like conspiracy, spoliation. That allowed us to a broader net suing various defendants. And so that was definitely one favorable thing.
speak up with the more respect you. Yeah. So we're able to do that, and we're going to get better law in New Mexico. Now, under New Mexico law, wherever the accident happens, that's where you apply the law. So New Mexico would have applied some of the Texas tort laws, but not all of them correctly. They use their own procedures and their own rules in New Mexico for the procedural. Is correct.
That's correct. And that would have been one thing that not a lot of lawyers as well versed in both Texas and New Mexico. So we are as well. We can apply certain laws and situations. Texas law applies other situations. New Mexico law applies. The biggest example is definitely the procedural law of the state of New Mexico, which is definitely more favorable, in our opinion.
And also, I think part of the reason is that we were able to get the case settled, even though we didn't get a final hearing on the jurisdiction, is that part of the arguments that we made were that some of the laws in Texas that they wanted to apply were considered against public policy in New Mexico. That was our argument. And New Mexico doesn't accept Texas law if it's against their public policy. As you can guess, with the fact that their law is so slanted against plaintiffs because the Supreme Courts are basically funded by industry, that a lot of those laws that are not against public policy in Texas, in fact, are upheld in Texas, be strongly against the public policy in New Mexico. So that was able to help us get this case as well, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. And also just the evidence. So in other words, part of our problem was getting the defendant to turn over the evidence to show us so we could prove up our case. And big difference between Texas and New Mexico, right? In Texas, defendants have a lot more shields not to turn over evidence, right?
Correct. Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as hiring, but I think it gets really close to that point where they're allowed to do that in Texas, but not in New Mexico.
Yeah. Well, I'll say they're doing anything unethical. They're actually following the rules and representing their clients in Texas. They're just have more shield not to turn over things in Texas as compared to New Mexico.
That's correct.
And of course, there's more downside in New Mexico not turning things over as well, too.
There is for sure significant consequences. Sanctions are available, striking the things like that. New Mexico take it very seriously.
And that coming out in opinions as well in New Mexico that you don't see to the same degree in Texas.
Correct. That is true.
Okay. Overall, clients went from a very bleak situation. Tell us a little bit about the clients. First of all, we're two sets of clients, basically. There was the father who was severely injured, and basically he became an invalid. Mentally, it was a head injury, or he probably had the mental IQ of a 2-year-old or 3-year-old. Very sad case. But he had young children, too, in Mexico. And those children, when we found out about them, they were nearly starving to death, right?
Yes, they were dire situations. Poverty, strict area where they lived, didn't have access to just the basic needs you take for granted. Clothing. They had just very meager conditions. Didn't have access to a really bad situation.
And I don't know about you, but I felt incredible pressing for the children, especially for the children in Mexico, because they lost everything they had, all the money they had, everything. It was a very dire situation for them. Their mother had to sell all her clothes, everything to try to feed the kids. I think you felt like me, we felt a lot of pressure to try to get recovery for these children. And man, what a change of life for them.
Absolutely. There was quite a bit of pressure and completely led.
It's an incredible story for them. They went from abject poverty to now where they can live an incredible life now in Mexico with huge opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
And there were a lot of issues about that too, because there were issues in Texas, New Mexico about who can sue and who can't. And that was benefited everybody as well, both sides that we were able, everybody, defendants, but certainly the father, the children benefited from being able to sue in Texas, in New Mexico as opposed to Texas, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.